Before we get going into your Hockey IQ podcast episode, I want to thank our sponsor, Rapid Shot. Rapid Shot is the smart shooting lane. It's like a batting cage for hockey players. Very cool. Tracks your shot in three ways: accuracy, shot speed, and reaction time. Easy to use. Actually, I used it when I played and was growing up. Very easy. Simply scan your phone in, select your settings, and start shooting. You can see your stats on the app and online. You can check them out at rapidshot.com. Great small business. I actually grew up with one of the owner's sons and have played with all the family members by now, just in local pickups here in Ohio. Very cool local business. Awesome product. I love it. I know quite a few NHLers have them in their homes. A lot of D1 programs have it at their rinks. So you have to check this out. Rapidshot.com. Check it out. Rapid Shot, thank you so much for sponsoring our podcast. On the Hockey IQ podcast today, we bring on Keegan McMindes. Super excited. Keegan owns Keeg's Edges in Columbus, Ohio. Greatest town on earth. Definitely best state ever, anywhere. Gotta say, really excited, Keegan. You opened my mind to a lot of things around my skates that I didn't even think about.
Yeah, I think that's the goal is we're always trying to, get better performance out of our steel. And, I've kind of got a process and procedure that works for, keeping people consistent and keeping people upright. I think that's the most important part, especially at my age as we get older, right?
Yeah, we go down much easier than we
Yeah.
used to, which is funny. But I mean, when we think about skates and skating and sharpening and all of this, we think about a lot of the profiling, right? Like, and it's more of like, what is your depth? Do you do 3/8? Do you do a half? Do you do 5/8? All of that, and that's usually where it ends. And then you go to the local rink, and it's pretty hit or miss on if it's going to be a good sharpening or a bad sharpening, and not much else. But obviously, you're going a lot more detail. So what all goes into, and we'll keep this high level and we'll drill down. But what goes into just having good skates, good skate edges? Obviously, the holder warps over time, so that's something needs to go into. But let's start from the profile and work our way up the boot. Like, what goes into a good sharpening?
Well, truthfully, the sharpening is just like it's it's kind of interesting because I give every person that sharpens skates the benefit of the doubt because everyone is trying to, you know, give somebody good edges. But I think what it comes down to is, your machine maintenance, your consistency, and then you take into account like what kind of skater somebody is. Are they an agile skater? Are they a power skater? The hollows can actually be more directed towards like your angle of attack because there are some larger guys that I deal with that are still skating on a 5/8 or maybe even a little bit sharper. But and the angle of attack is essentially how steep that bank angle is as they start to be agile on their edges. They're turning, how they're transitioning from inside to outside edge, that kind of stuff. But like the old adage was, sharper is typically better, which as we've kind of advanced along, we've started to realize that the more surface area that you put on the ice, the less friction coefficient you're going to have from where the steel is actually hitting the ice. So you're creating less drag. So the sharper your hollow is, you're actually going to dig into the ice and create more drag. Whereas the larger your hollow is, you're going to set on top of the ice and you're going to reduce that friction coefficient. So, um, there's a lot of things that play into it. One of the things that I offer is like an edge trials. So if you wanted to try like 3 different cuts throughout 3 weeks, we kind of start to dial that hollow in. So if you're not sure on where you're going to be as far as your cut, we can kind of get that squared away. But the main thing is just being square and sharp. The with me and my machine and my holders, I make sure that everything gets calibrated to exactly center. And I have a couple different holders that I use, like the figure skate holder, whether it's that one or the general holder for 3 millimeter hockey skates, or I've got a 4 millimeter goalie set as well. So each one of those holders has um, basically a zero. So like, that's where that steel is supposed to be hitting that stone when you're sharpening. And 4 millimeter steel, how I sharpen is a little bit more primitive. I still bump grind when I do 4 millimeter steel. 3 millimeter steel, I do a nice light pass for the first one, and then I kind of check to see where that stone's hitting the steel. I mark all of my steel to keep that consistency. So I will take a marker and actually mark the steel, whether it's hockey skates, figure skates, whatever I'm sharpening. I just keep that consistency going to make sure that we reach all the edges. Everything gets honed down with the leather straps. We stone things that need to be stoned. More harder or like refined steel, coated steel. We don't want to wear that coating out. So stoning that stuff is definitely a no-go if you go to your local rink and you have some really nice diamond-like carbon steel or some tungsten coated steel, like some of the Pulse TIs have. So those don't really need to be rubbed on a whole lot with some abrasive equipment. So, if we do need some stoning to get some of those burrs off or something, we use like a clay stone, something that's a little bit less abrasive. Um, but uh, but yeah, as far as figuring out what your hollow is and what works best for you, it's hockey is still a very very feel sport. Some guys operate better on halves and some guys operate on a one. I have sharpened skates up to 1.5 hollows. And that's for guys that are pretty agile, but again, they understand that angle of attack. They know how far to lean into that edge to actually grab it and get going. So, um, people have asked me, especially parents, do we need to be widening, kids' edges as they get older? If that's something that they're interested in and they want to try and get more speed out of their streamline skating, absolutely. But still, we got to stay inside that comfort zone. If we're not efficient on the ice, we're not effective, right?
All right. You just dropped a ton of like fancy words.
Yeah.
So I think we need to start and build our way up here. Okay. So
Okay.
when you say hollow, what do you mean?
So basically, you sharpen skates into a hollow. So for reference, you just got like an inside and an outside edge. So the more narrow the hollow, so we'll have a half as like a baseline. So that'll be kind of like the middle. And then as we go to like a 3/8, we're getting sharper, and as we go to 5/8, we're getting wider. So as the numbers go up, and you get a wider hollow. Again, like in more straight line aspects, you're going to put more surface area on the ice. And as you get sharper, you're going to dig into the ice a little bit more. And some people like that. As a goalie, I actually like sharper skates because I like to be able to toe push a little bit better. So I can actually grab the edge with either the ball of my foot or my toe and be able to push across the crease. But yeah, that's what we're talking about is the actual cut. So the stone hits in the middle, and then you create two edges.
All right. So we're talking basically like radius of the hollow. Like,
Yep, ROH is the fancy term for radius of hollow. Yep. But yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about.
yeah. So you say 1 inch. What how are we measuring 1 inch? Like, why is it called 1 inch versus a 3/8 inch?
So it's if you look at like a 1 inch circle, that's if you drew the entire circle, that's where that circle is going to impact that steel.
Beautiful. So 1 equals really, really little bite into the ice, a lot of
Correct.
good glide. And then on
Yep.
the opposite side of the spectrum, say 3/8, we've got more bite and less glide because that stone is going further into the steel. Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Awesome. So when we're thinking about diving into the next piece, which you mentioned, which was like the types of style versus like how much you want to be in the ice. I guess the old adage is like if you're a lighter player, you're going to usually prefer a deeper cut because you're not playing and like pushing as much mass down into the ice compared to maybe someone who's a little bit bigger is usually going to want to go towards maybe the half or 5/8. Does that still ring true in general? Obviously, there's anomalies.
Yeah. Uh, like larger guys, actually, I would say at least a 5/8 or more. And that again, that it's all that comfort aspect. But I'll always ask people like, what level of hockey do they play? Um, what type of skater they are, and kind of like what their weight is. So weight, typically by looking at somebody, you can kind of understand like how much pressure they're going to be putting into the ice. But just to get a better idea of what we're dealing with, as once you're about like, 150, 160, depending on your angle of attack, that's that kind of tweener zone. Are we at that like one half, or are we at that 5/8? I have had smaller guys as well that are just very deliberate with their steps. They're very aggressive into the ice, and they do have a wider hollow. Again, that's just kind of a feel thing for them. But I've seen kids run a one hollow, and that's
I
quite
couldn't
a lot
stand
of
up if that
glide.
was what they went with. Like
Yeah,
I'd fall straight down.
yeah, yeah, quite a lot of glide, not a whole lot of bite. But I've seen this kid skate, and he's very very aggressive, very deliberate with his steps. Beautiful crossovers. So like as he's getting agile, he's very low to the ice. So as you get low to the ice and that pitch starts to turn, you're going to start to grab that edge into the ice. So as you get wider, you kind of have to turn a little bit harder to get more bite. But yeah, just the mental understanding that of where your edges are. Like the human mind's kind of weird. Like if you know where your edges are as you're skating, your mind will start to pick that up. And I think kids at a younger age will pick it up faster than like people that are trying to start skating in their 30s. But yeah, it's interesting because I've seen some young kids around Columbus that are just absolute maniacs on the ice, and they're running a three-quarter cut or something, something that you don't typically see on younger kids. But again, it's just that understanding of where those edges are and how aggressive you are into the ice.
All right. Love that. I think we can say we completed that enough. Check mark box. Next thing I want to talk about, and you mentioned it, is like making sure to get a good cut around the types of cutting stones. So there's
Mhm.
different types of stones. You mentioned a 60 and an 80, and I'm an idiot and don't know the difference between the two. I already forgot what you mentioned. So if you couldn't help break us
Yeah,
down the different types of cutting stones, I know there's 60, 80, and there's probably way more.
yeah. There's a bunch of different stones that different manufacturers offer. Um, you know, I prefer a Howie's Blackstone. It's got a little bit higher grit on it. So when you start talking about grit, it's basically like how smooth or coarse the cut's going to be. I prefer a smoother cut as a sharpener, and also it depends on the person who's sharpening skates because it's sharpening is kind of an art. So like as you press into the stone, depending on how much pressure you're using and all that kind of stuff is kind of how sharpeners will pick their stones. I prefer higher grit stones. I think they do a better job cutting the steel. And also I'm pretty light with my passes, so I shave less steel off, but it just makes me a little bit more precise. Um, so, but yeah, there's there's a plethora of different stones from different manufacturers, but yeah, I mean you've got 60 grits, you've got 65, 70s, like depending on which manufacturer you look at, they've all got different types of grit, but I'm kind of an 80 grit guy. I like higher grit stones. There's those happy mediums. Some stones will help absorb heat and kind of help maintain that temper. So guys that are a little bit heavier into the stone can kind of manage their heat a little bit better. Because the last thing we want to do is heat up a stone to where it's or heat up a steel to the point to where it doesn't have that edge retention that it originally had when it came out of the box, right? So
Okay. Um, Smoother is better in
in
general.
my opinion. Yes,
Yeah.
in
So
my
like
opinion.
how does that relate to on ice performance, like smoother versus coarser?
So smoother, you're going to shave ice a little bit better. You know the you won't have as much chatter. If you're getting at it and you go to make a hard stop, it will help shave ice a little bit better. But some guys that do have a sharper hollow will still get that chatter because they're actually catching the ice and almost chipping it off instead of shaving it. So that that's a uh, that's what can happen. Um, but uh, but yeah, the smoother hollows, they can help limit the chatter as you're making those hard stops and like from a goalie's perspective, when I'm at the top of the crease and I'm following the play and I'm shaving ice, the smoother hollow definitely allows me to do that nice and quickly and not have anything feel like it's grabbing or catching or anything like that. Now, in men's leagues, as we know, the crease gets pretty tore up. So about maybe halfway through the second, you're kind of catching stuff anyways. But yeah, having a smoother cut definitely helps. With shave ice and make smoother transitions, things like that.
Got it. All right. Next on my list here of things that you totally went above our head, but was awesome. Different types of steel, and then you also mentioned coated steel. So, like, what is a normal steel that players are using versus other options that are out there?
Yeah, so it's like regular stainless steel. They're obviously less expensive. But regular stainless steel, can be prone to, getting a bend in it, and that it's going to wear out a little bit faster. Your reinforced steel, so my vendor out of Toronto, they do the diamond like carbon coated steel. So they have a higher carbon actual steel set, and then they have it coated with diamond like carbon coated coating. But it helps with edge retention. That way you don't have to get them sharpened as often. But yeah, just overall performance as well. It helps glide through the ice. So it reduces the amount of drag on the outside of the blade. Stainless steel is still pretty good as far as reducing drag. It's not like it's not a huge difference. I think the performance aspect on glide is minimal when you're talking about the coating. It does help, um, but yeah, then there's other manufacturers that will make like tungsten coated steel, kind of the same premise, just a more robust, tighter grained metal that will help with edge retention. But typically, from a timeline perspective, like I get asked all the time, how often should we be sharpening skates, things like that. It's kind of subjective because you go into the boards hard and you roll an edge, you should probably go get those sharpened. But yeah, I mean, from like hours, from stainless all the way up to like your uh, higher level steel, you could have a good 6 to 8 hours of ice time, and then start to feel dull. Get them sharpened. That's kind of like your stainless window. I do know guys that go a lot longer, but they're also only skating maybe like once a week for a game. So that's not a full hour. Like, obviously in a game you're taking shifts and things like that. So, but as you get higher up into levels of steel, as far as your diamond like carbon stuff, I mean, you're looking between 10 to 12 hours, maybe even more. But yeah, the reinforced edges that manufacturers are coming out with, you're getting a lot more ice time on your edges, which is convenient because you're not coming to me to have them sharpen them every couple days or something like that. Because some of these kids they're practicing every day, some of them twice a day. Putting a lot of hours on steel, and that can get taxing if you've only got one set of steel and you've got to go get them sharpened every few days.
So, all right. So we've got our edges, we've got our hollows, we figured out the steel, we figured out the stone, how we're going to kind of cut it. Um, the other piece is like keeping our edges nice, like making sure we're not throwing our bag around like crazy would be nice, or having a harder um encasing, not just like one of those soakers, right? That would be
Mhm.
big. And then also, you'd mentioned something about heat can be a big problem as well. So if you wouldn't like mind walking through just like proper blade storage or steel storage,
Yeah,
I've always heard them called either like runners or steel. Is that kind of all this one and the same?
yeah, it's all the same. Runners, steel, just whatever you prefer, I guess. But yeah, so blade storage and maintenance. So after every game, I make sure to pull my steel out and wipe it down. That way you get all the water drops off of it. Every once in a while, like you pull your skates out and just left them in your skate guards or soakers, you'll start to see like these little dots on your blade, and it's oxidation. It's just where that water's kind of accumulated. So try and get them as dry as possible after games and ice time, just to store them, whether you are putting them back into soakers or if you got a carrier or what have you. Also, if you do have a carrier, so for instance, um, Howard makes fantastic carriers, by the way. With these will, like if you have damp blades or whatever, you're just closing it into all that damp environment. So one trick that I tell people is you take those little silicone packets, toss one in there, and then just every once in a while pull it out and replace it. Helps it kind of absorb some of that moisture, so that when you are storing them in these blade carriers, you're not putting them in a super damp environment. It does help absorb some of that moisture. The big thing that I've seen, especially I see it a lot in the summer, when people either have their bags in their car, they're at work, and then they go play a game. And I see broken blades, and that's that extreme uh, transfer of heat. You've got extreme heat in the car. You go to the game, you step on the ice, you've got extreme heat, extreme cold. So that's gonna make your steel a lot more prone to having a break. So I've got a couple examples, and I'll kind of walk through like exactly where these broke. So um, these typically break right forward to center. So like right as they're stepping on the ice is where they've got their hot blade that was just sitting in their car for the last 8 hours or more, and they go straight to that ice, and that creates that weak point. So um, be mindful of how we're storing our skates and our steel, because this is just one, and then I've got another one here. These actually ironically came in the exact same day, and we are able to get these guys on some new steel rather quickly. So, but yeah, all forward to center, right about the time they would be stepping on the ice. So they're creating that weak point by going from extreme heat to extreme cold. But yeah, in the winter, I mean, it's cold out, so maybe not so much of a big deal in the winter. But yeah, just in the summer and on hot days, just be mindful of where our bag's at. That way we don't have an accident.
Yeah, and I'll recommend that everyone gets one of those sweet blade carriers, steel
Yeah.
carriers, and make sure they've got more than one set, especially if you're a competitive player. Nothing worse than like having it break and then your SOL or the steel pops out. And like I've seen that also happen where the piece up in the holder itself snaps off on some players, and then they're
hmm
up, they're SOL as they say, and now you're like trying to scramble for a whole new pair of skates. Maybe you're looking for rentals. Like it's worth it if you're playing competitive hockey to go get yourself a second pair of steel, have them sharpened, ready to go. It makes it super easy. If there's any issues that come about, if you don't have an equipment manager sitting there with an extra pair, make sure you have it on your person itself.
Yep, a lot of parents that I deal with, they're going to these tournaments, and not only are they unsure on the sharpening qualities that they'll get, but just in case, like at least two, maybe three sets. That way they, typically with these kids in these tournaments, they're playing, maybe 6 games or so. So they kind of like split it between definitely two sets, 3 games on one, 3 games on the other. But then you've always got that emergency set. So, if you're unsure on where you want to get your skates sharpened at a tournament, especially with kids, it's nice to have a couple backup sets, just in case something happens.
Yeah, and you're obviously doing work with some NHL players. Are they're probably carrying even more than just two sets. How
Well,
many would be
yeah.
normal?
So NHL players are kind of interesting. So there are some players that, believe it or not, between periods are getting their blades completely swapped out for a new set. And I mean, typically throughout a season, you might have an NHL player that's got between 15 or 20 sets, sitting around just waiting to be used, or if there's something that'll happen that they got to swap them out. And obviously, the equipment managers in the NHL are just absolute animals when it comes to making sure their players have exactly what they need. I mean, we always see like the stick assists and things like that, which is awesome to witness. But yeah, the steel aspect, if these guys are skating hard, they're putting a lot of energy into those edges, and guys that go into the boards hard, or take a puck off the skate and has one break or what have you. Those are moments where they come back to the bench and they've got another set for them, pop it right back in, and off they go.
Yeah, I can personally attest to. I had one of those, like, hockey's hard. You can't just always make tape passes. Someone threw a nice hard pass, and I had to kick it up off my skate, and bam, right in the middle. I could feel it crack underneath me. The glide, you're just full drag at that point. It's the worst feeling
Yep.
ever, and you're like, oh shit,
Yep.
terrible.
Yeah.
But no, definitely key, and makes it easy on everyone. All right, so I've expelled the maximum amount that I understand about steels and stones and everything, the runners and edges. What am I missing? There's probably more to this, or should we head on to talking about the holder next?
Well, you want to talk about profiling real quick?
All right. So what is profiling? I was assuming profiling was part of, like, how do we hollow it out? What kind of steel are we using, and how does it sit in the holder? I assume that was like kind of the overarching thing. So
Yeah.
already I'm
So,
an idiot. Help me out here.
all right. So profiling, I've got this is Mark Seal. It's kind of exaggerated a little bit, but you can see all the little marks that we've got here. So, um, but this is basically, profiling is changing the shape of the blade. So if you look at the blade from a profiles perspective, we're changing the shape of it. So we're like people say, re-rockering, or things like that. But so the main premise behind, like, the science recently has been, shorter radii, and we're talking about, again, the circle, just from the side perspective, a circle. So shorter radii on, like, the toe and the ball of the foot. That way you can grab the ice and start to accelerate. And then having a longer or wider radius, towards, like, your uh, speed zone or your agility zone. So if we break up the quadrants, you've got acceleration, agility, speed, and stability. So that's basically off, like the quad stuff that ProSharp does. There's also, like, superiors. Superiors are basically like a three radii profile, and some of it comes down to skating style. There's tons of different profiling. There's CAG profiling, which changes, like, center line and pitch, and there's uh, traditional profiling, which is typically between one or two radii. And again, same premise: shorter radii on the toe to grab the ice and accelerate, and have some agility, and then longer radii towards, like, your stride area and your stability area. So um, and it kind of works off the same premise as your hollow that we talked about. So more surface area, more speed. Again, longer radii, more surface area, more speed. Um, Again, just trying to reduce that friction coefficient between the steel and the ice to maintain speed and performance. But yeah, for reference, like a quad zero is a 6, a 9, an 11, and 13 radius. So the 6 is on the toe, the 9 is in the ball of the foot, the 11 is in that speed zone, and then your 13 is on the heel. So that's just one aspect of profiling. The unique factors that come into play is, uh, you know, the type of skater you are. Are you a power skater? Are you an agile skater? Are you you have a giant foot versus a smaller foot. So the quad zeros is the zero is actually like the size. So there's a quad one, a quad two, there's a quad XXS, there's a quad S, there's all these different sizes, and then as you get bigger or smaller, those radii begin to change to match kind of the size of your steel. And then but yeah, there's a lot that goes into profiling. Some things that I do personally to kind of help people out on mapping out how they're or what profile they should be wearing. So I mentioned earlier about marking steel and actually running that stone across. So if your tooling on the machine is absolutely square, like running that strip right down the middle of the steel, and you've got somebody that's got maybe 5, 6 hours of ice time on their steel, they're going to start wearing down that steel a little bit differently. So each individual person wears down their steel differently. So by marking that steel, I'm able to kind of map out like where they're pivoting, where they're transitioning. That's like the focal point of where I look, because as you make that nice light pass with marked steel with square tooling, you create a wear pattern. So you'll see exactly where they wear down steel. So where there's like virtually no black marks is where they're going from their inside to outside edge. That's basically their pivot point. So that would be considered their agility zone. So they're grabbing the ice, they're using that point on their steel to move from inside to outside edge. Where that point is kind of dictates whether you're going to put somebody on a quad or a superior or things like that. Because the what you want to kind of not do is have that pivot point in a spot where you're going to have like two radii that kind of come together, because you can, instead of being on the ball of your foot and grabbing the ice to be able to pivot, you might grab that 6 radius and really bite into the ice, or you might not have enough bite if that transition point is moved further back. So that's kind of a gauge that I use a little bit to help people out on where their profiling should be. But there's all sorts of assessments online that'll help with sizing, and I still use some assessments online to kind of gauge where people should be. Helps me out with sizing as far as the radius, because whatever algorithm that goes into to figure out if it's a quad zero, a quad one, or a quad two, like that's an entire ProSharp thing that I don't entirely understand at this point. But the wear pattern definitely helps me, and helps me put players on good profiles, and I've had quite a bit of success with you know from kids that are 10 years old and to NHL players that I've worked with on getting them on proper profiles. So
All right. So profiling is basically where the steel meets the ice and then how you utilize that steel on the ice, whether it be for acceleration, where we're kind of using the toe, pivots, and then, yeah. So let's start there. I got some more follow-ups on this.
yeah,
How's that?
the basic premise of profiling is changing the shape of the steel as you look at it from the side. And that's to map it to fit the player and their performance and their skating style.
Okay. So acceleration zone is one. What is that?
That's going to be a shorter radius to allow you to grab the ice. Because if you think about how like a smaller circle is going to have more of a focal point to grab the ice, whereas a larger circle is going to have a wider area to grab the ice. So with like if you think about it as like trying to press a ball into the ice versus trying to stab it with a knife. A ball is going to have more surface area, and obviously it's not sharp, but for reference, larger is going to want to slide across the ice. Smaller is going to want to grab the ice. So that's the smaller radii are going to be on the toe to help grab the ice and accelerate to get that push off.
And that would be, I'm assuming, one of the reasons why you'd want to sharpen further up into that toe on the steel. I feel like a lot of people just kind of like let it end rather than
Yeah,
finish the Just
Um,
sharpen it all the way up.
yeah. So again, for reference, I'll grab a set of steel here. Um, so my sharpening that I like to do is pull this. Oh boy, where's my camera? There it is. Hey, but pull this toe up a little bit. Now, with sharpening, especially on toes and heels, as this curve comes up, you're going to get more heat. So you see a lot of toes and heels that get burnt. Um, so from sharpening's perspective, we're going to pull some pressure off the toe. That way you're because even passes for sharpening is kind of subjective because as these decide to turn, we're getting more heat because the stone being round and this being round, you're getting more of a focal point. But what I like to do is pull this sharpening up taller so that we're not getting this little toe pick. You'll see it with different manufacturers that have machines that sharpen will come up and stop, and then it goes back, and then it stops on the heel as well. So for reference, the steel here that we're looking at, it's got a nice fat toe bevel and a nice fat heel bevel. Over time, when you're stopping here, you're compromising your performance with your toe and your heel because you want to accelerate up here, you want to stop and be stable back here. So, and if you got a second here, I'll grab. Here's one. So this has been sharpened quite a bit. So as you can tell, we're kind of like lost that toe bevel, kind of lost that heel bevel. So over time, if we're not being
So
cognizant
is
of,
bevel like that like 90-degree-ish angle that you're kind of creating
yeah,
where it goes
so
up?
yep, yep. So as we go from straight here, we get a bevel and then it goes this way. So the change of direction is what we're looking at. So yeah, we want to maintain those as best as possible as sharpeners. And it's all about pressure really. You got to understand that as the angle changes here and you start to get into this curve, you're going to get more heat. So, and there's also less steel on the toe and the heel to absorb that heat. So, like in the belly of the blade, there's obviously the heat can disperse a little bit better. When you get to the toe and the heel, you've got less steel for that heat to disperse throughout the blade. So, you'll get a lot more heat here. So, pressure is important when it comes to sharpening on the toe and heel because we really just want to maintain this fat bevel on the heel and this slightly tapered one on the toe. So, but yeah, that's kind of what I do as a sharpener is kind of maintain those. I don't like leaving little toe picks here and there. Um, there's a lot of machines out there that are sharpening, and I'm not anti any of them because they definitely have their space. I know that there are some teams that will have one on their bench in case somebody doesn't have an extra set of steel. And they go into the boards hard, they roll an edge, they do something crazy. It is a nice way to pop it in there, get a decent enough edge to finish out the game. But I do have some people that will they've got one sitting at home and they'll run it through there. But every like 2 to 3 weeks they'll bring it to me to kind of clean up those toe and heel bevels a little bit.
All right. So that was like towards the toe. Okay. And then walk me back. What's like the next zone? We got acceleration zone that's more towards the heel, or sorry,
Yep,
towards the toe.
yep.
Then what's next?
So your agility zone, that's going to be a little bit larger of a hollow, not so large that you're putting more surface area on the ice and you're maintaining that speed, but it's that happy medium. So right between, sharp or a smaller radius to grab the ice. It's a little bit bigger, so it's not as abrasive. But it's enough to grab the ice, push off, and be agile. So it's that tweener radii that's gonna allow you to grab your edges and move when you want to.
All right. And that's the one that you're pivoting under, right? The agility zone.
Yep, yep. And each person skates differently. Like I was talking about with that wear pattern that I look at. I've seen, some, defensemen that since they are pivoting a little bit more towards their heels to skate backwards and, challenge rushes, things like that, their transition will show a little bit deeper in their stance. But defensemen need that larger radius on their heel, regardless of what profile, just so that they can maintain stable and match speeds on offensive rushes.
Okay, so agility zone, we could have one on the front and the back. So front would be more so going from
Not no,
backwards to
not
forwards.
so not so much. It's more of how many radii you put on the blade. Like if you're transitioning like more towards the middle of your foot, or a little bit further back than like the ball of your foot, like the superiors are a 3 radii profile, so that might be better suited. There are defensemen that wear quads. There it's again it's that feel thing. But the forward skating transition aspect of it, that's typically in the ball of the foot.
Okay, follow me here. Um, so just to reiterate, because I'm starting to get fuzzy, and I'm assuming our listeners can be a little bit fuzzy too. Just with radii in different parts of the blade. Let's talk this one slowly so we can absorb it all.
Okay. So uh, essentially on this steel, there's the marks, right? So you've got the toe, which is going to be your shorter, more abrasive radius to grab the ice and accelerate. A little bit less abrasive, a little bit larger radius to grab the ice and be able to pivot, but not so much that you're like basically grabbing your edge and falling. But Yeah, this one needs to slide a little bit. So when I was talking about that tweener zone, like the 6, 9, and 11, so this is that tweener zone. So you're going to slide a little bit with this 9 radius, but this one is basically built to grab the ice and let you dig in and go. The 9's going to slide a little bit, be a little bit less abrasive. And then once you hit your full stride, you're on an 11-foot radius. So the longer your radius is, the more surface area and the less friction. You're going to maintain that speed that you just created up here. And then you have your stability zone. The stability zone is just a little bit wider so that you can grab the ice and stop. You can be better on your heels as you're skating backwards. Helps a little bit with backwards crossovers, things like that. So as you go down the blade, your radii get larger and larger and larger. What also happens with this type of profile is it will give you a little bit of a forward pitch, so you have a little bit better angle of attack to the ice. So it's going to set you up on the balls of your feet a little bit better. So ergonomically, as these radii get bigger and bigger and bigger, it puts you in a better position to attack the ice.
All right, I think I've got it now. So
Okay.
radii, basically, if you put your skate on the ice and allowed it to draw a circle, the larger one would mean the bigger circle you'd create. So like 11 radii would be like 11-foot circle.
Well, it's a radius, so it'd be a 22-foot circle.
20. Thank you. Good. Glad someone's doing math around here.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
See, double it. You got it.
Yeah, as you got, a larger, but yes, so if you were to draw, like for instance, if this blade had one radius on it, and you drew, say it's a 10-foot radius, if you drew a 20-foot circle with a 10-foot radius, the bottom of this blade would hit that circle.
Meaning it is flatter than something that would be on the lower end.
Correct. So, and as you get like wider and wider and wider, so goalie steel is pretty large radii. I mean, you're talking, 20 foot radii or more. I mean, there's like SAM profiling. that's a whole nother ball game. But essentially, there's with sand profiling and goalie skates, you've got a 10-foot radius on the toe to grab the ice and be able to butterfly push, toe push, and then a 50 millimeter flat spot. So that flat spot is really nice, especially when you're at the top of the crease and you're shaving ice. And then I believe it's a 27-foot radius on the heel. But again, it's for that stability aspect. So odd man rushes, you can gain ground and then get into your C cuts going backwards a little bit quicker. So more surface area again on the heel, so that when you're trying to match speeds on breakouts, things like that, you're in better position to do so. And again, that forward tilt between the 10 to that 20, I think it's a 27-foot radius. I'll have to look that up. But yeah, the 10 to the wider radius and the back's going to pitch you forward a little bit, put you in a little bit better angle of attack to see the play and react accordingly.
Beautiful. All right. I feel like I now at least understand it enough to have a conversation at an intelligent level. Thanks, Keith. The next piece that you had mentioned that I wanted to kind of break out here, what was around center line. The pitch we already talked about, how you kind of pitch forward and pitch back, but you talked about also like the center line. Like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so the on a lot of like higher grade steel, you'll actually have a center line marked. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, that little mark right there. So that's going to be center line. That's basically just the balance point for the blade. So when we start getting into like CAG profiling, that center line shifts either forwards or backwards. And that's again towards it gives you a little bit better angle to the ice. But yeah, center line is just essentially the exact middle of the steel. And then when you get into profiling, you basically measure off of the center line to figure out where those radii go. So yeah.
So is it the center of the blade physically from a distance standpoint, or is it where it is from a balance standpoint?
It would be both for the most part. I believe the center line as they market manufacturer wise might be like physically, but as you start getting different radii into it, obviously that balance point is going to change a little bit. But I think it's actually more physically than it is anything. I just use it as a reference to mark steel.
Got it. So it's kind of like a manufacturer, like start here and then you can adjust as need be from this.
Correct.
Beautiful. All right. I feel like I'm getting smarter. It's to the point that I feel the folds developing in my brain. So the other piece you mentioned was CAG profiling. I'm assuming this is a simple thing, but what does CAG stand for?
So CAG is an actual like machine. So just like they have ProSharp profiling, it's the machine name. And essentially what it is basically taking that center line and moving it left or right. I'm not as knowledgeable with CAG profiling as I am like ProSharp or traditional profiling. The main premise of it is just shifting that point forwards or backwards. Most steel that I've seen that's been CAG profiled is stamped, and it'll have like say like a 25 and 50, like it'll have like a number and a slash and a 50. So if you see that on like some of the pro stock stuff, it's basically taking that center line and moving it left or right to give you different pitch. The numbers, like for reference, if we did the 25 and 50, would be within that 75 millimeter zone from the center line. You have a forward set or a rear leaning set. So that's essentially what CAG stuff is. But like I said, I'm not as knowledgeable with CAG profiling as I am with some of the other stuff.
All right, spell that for me. Is that KAG? CAG?
Yep. Or no, sorry, CAG. CAG.
CAG, CAG. Got it. Yeah. So another thing that was a little fuzzy in my brain, which I'm assuming also means our listeners' brain, is when you were talking about quad or quads. Yep. What is that? Is that something we already talked about?
Well, it's just the number of radius, so quad. and superior is the three. I don't know what Latin term that comes from, but so in somebody's language, I'm sure superior is three somewhere. But it's just the number of radii that are on the steel. So quad is going to be four.
Okay, so quad stands for, so quad is the number of radii that are on the steel itself. So as they're manufacturing, how many they put in there.
Yes.
Brilliance. Okay. I've got a really long thing of notes right now, so I just want to make sure I'm grabbing it all here for us. All right, we've talked grit, we've talked steel, we talked about some good storage, talking about, let's go back to the zones. We had acceleration zone, agility zone, and stability zone. What am I missing?
And
Another
speed.
zone in there? Speed?
Yeah. Speeds between your stability and agility. So that's basically like when you're at full stride, where that steel is going to be hitting. Again, that longer uh, radius is going to be hitting the ice at that point. So more surface area sitting on top of the ice, more speed, less drag.
All right, and then stability is basically mostly gliding.
Well, it's just a wider radius to make you more stable on your heels.
Okay, so that's towards our heels.
Yep.
Brilliance. Okay. What else on the steel have we not hit?
Well, we covered different coatings. I mean, yeah. I mean, some of the steel that you can buy is already profiled. So like some of your like pulse TIs and things like that. If you buy like the higher end stuff, it'll say like a power profile. Your power profiles are essentially going to be quads. So they'll have four different radii built into that blade.
Okay, got it. All right. Let's now move back to figure out how players use their edges. So you're using marked steel. So how do you mark steel to find the wear patterns? And I'm basically guessing like the more it wears, the less of whatever you put on there is available. And that's where you're noticing different points. And is that based on where like the edges disappear or level of the
So
steel?
when you mark steel, black magic marker right across the edge, on the bottom of it, and then that nice light pass, you'll start to see black showing on one side and then the metal on the other side. So the black shows that that is worn down more than the side that's showing metal. And that's kind of how you map out where the black is versus where the metal's at.
So you're doing a black magic marker. So the black
Yep.
disappears where you use it, or it stays there better because you're
That's
pushing
going to be
into it.
higher. That's going to be higher steel. So as you start to wear down that hollow, like for reference, like we'll go like that. So this side's lower than this side, because you've been putting more wear on this side than you have been on this side. So when you run that stone across, this side is going to hit the stone first. So then you end up with this little black side on this side. Does that make sense?
Got it. Okay. So you're marking it so when you actually go to sharpen the skate, you can see where the stone is hitting the blade, and
Yeah.
therefore it tells you the information. It's not you like putting it on the ice, have a magic marker,
Correct.
suddenly take it off
Yeah.
of, say, Cam
It's
Atkinson's foot and being able to see it. You actually have to sharpen the skate.
you actually have to sharpen the skate. So, but yeah, and this is all like to do a proper wear pattern. You will have to make sure that your machine is absolute zero to hit the middle of that steel. If you go to do a wear pattern and you see that your stone is like if you check toe in the heel, kind of that bump grind aspect of it is if you're checking center toe heel, the you'll see where that stone's hitting. So for reference, like this is like calibrated steel that I did this morning. So if you can see the black on the outside, and then you see the silver in the middle, So my stone is hitting exactly center on this steel. So when we put in the clamp, I do everything exactly the same. I pull the clamp lever up at the exact same spot every time. And I know that because I touch the screw at the top every single time, just barely tap it. So, I mean, you're within micromillimeters of the absolute square of what this steel was with 3 millimeter steel that I put in that holder. So as close as you can possibly get it, and then just see where that transition zone, that bald spot I was talking about. Because if this steel was worn down, and this is flat cross ground steel, so if this steel was worn down and there was a bald spot more up this way, you're kind of in that quad area. If it's down this way, you're looking at more of like a superior. Um, so, but yeah, that kind of helps with mapping people's wear patterns out to what fits them and how their skating style would benefit from the profile.
All right. Beautiful. And to summarize at the higher level here, you're marking the steel after, say, 5-6 hours. Someone gives you that. So they use the steel that you've already given them that is perfectly balanced. It's the same size. You give it to them. They skate for 5-6 hours. They give it back. You magic marker it up, and then you're going to throw it through the sharpener. And what you see being hit first and showing the steel is what is not being used, compared to the stuff that stays black is what's being used and being worn down.
Yeah, I mean it's all being used. It'll just wear out faster on one side versus the other side.
Yes. Perfect. All right. Feeling smarter here. Okay. So with this, when we're talking about the steel, it also needs to be held into place properly.
Yeah.
Um, Plastic, I'm assuming, warps relatively easy. And I know you and I talked about they're actually starting to use some metal pieces in the holders, the plastic holders themselves, to make sure that that steel that you're doing well actually stays where it's supposed to and doesn't jiggle and warp and mess around. So you wouldn't mind going into that and the holders, because that's another piece that's unthought about, but
Yeah.
plays a big piece into where do we actually wear, maybe where to use things more, how do we have to shape our ankles because things got changed and altered.
Yep. So the big change that I see with the CCM XS holders, there is the plastic spindle that holds that blade into place. Over time, those little ratchets will kind of get worn out a little bit. But I have the upgraded versions. They have the metal that'll hold it into place. The the Bower holders, the Tukes or Tooks or however you want to pronounce them, they're held with basically a trigger system that has a plastic spring in them. And it's not necessarily a terrible thing, but over time it will compress. And the reason they make them plastic is based off of corrosion. So you're going to get more moisture inside that holder. So metal may or may not be the best thing as far as longevity as opposed to plastic. But I think we just got to be cognizant that over time, if our blade's wiggling around a little bit, it might be time to get a new holder. But there is quick fixes, with some guys that are just bound and determined to stay in that holder and that boot. You can take clear tape, put it on the runner or the blade, and put it into place, and it'll still move, but it won't be as aggressive, so you're less likely to feel it as you're skating, and your skates won't click when you're walking.
Yes, if you hear a click, you probably should look into your holder. I think
Yeah.
that would be a great thing, because I know plenty of players that had the clickety clankety as they're walking over to the ice
Yep.
sheet, and now you have an idea of why.
Yep.
So beautiful. Okay. Anything else with the holder? I didn't even know that about the tube, that they would have used the plastic for corrosion more than like cost and weight savings.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a few factors that go into it, but there's um, if you've got a metal spring, that's a pretty thin piece of metal that's going to get a lot of moisture in it. So, I mean, I'm sure that there's a wear factor that plays into it, but I mean, weight as well. The cost effectiveness maybe, but
Beautiful. All right. I we went really long on this one. Usually we keep the episodes 40 minutes, but this is just fantastic stuff. What else are we missing that we need to talk about? And we'll have you come back on the day for everything outside of the scope that we just talked about.
I mean, we covered a lot. There's Um, I think the main thing that I kind of talked about originally when it comes to quality skate sharpening is just consistency. The um, how I do things is pretty meticulous. I maintain my machine. I think 90% of good skate sharpening is machine maintenance, making sure it's clean, making sure it's square, making sure you're maintaining your holders. Having good equipment helps with quality skate sharpening, but maintaining that equipment. I have the wonderful luxury of being the only person that touches this machine. The only person that touches the holders. I know exactly where everything is. It's the same way that I left it the day prior. So, I know that other shops and, rinks and things don't have that luxury. So, you get one Yahoo that goes in there and starts messing with dials and things like that, trying to get, something that, or chase something that doesn't need to be chased on a blade. Then the next person goes to sharpen. They're already at a disadvantage as far as quality. So, but other than that, I think we've covered quite a bit of what I do and the things that I offer the Columbus area as far as hockey. But we're getting better. I just moved over into the Battery Hockey Academy, which is a fantastic group. They do all sorts of strength training. They've got an on-site strength instructor. They've got a sheet of synthetic. They've got a short sheet of ice. And they do some really cool stuff over here. So I'm very fortunate to be inside their facility and working side by side with those guys and helping their people out. But yeah, the shop's growing. Here in the next few weeks, we're going to see the orders start going in as far as the Howie stuff, the Blade Tech stuff. Huge shout out to Blade Tech. They've been fantastic since I started doing all this stuff, and they're also coming out with sticks. So if you haven't seen the Blade Tech sticks and seen some of the technology that's going into that stuff, it's a great group. But yeah, we're getting more tooling, we're getting more equipment, and we're just expanding the capabilities to bring good skates and good edges to Columbus.
Yeah, and I know that you also do some mail-in stuff as well. So if anyone wants to reach out to you and mail things in, that's possible as well. If I remember correctly,
Yeah,
obviously it's a business model like anything, right? Like get good quality stuff, you pay for it well, but make sure that we're supporting and keeping a good local business up and running, and make sure you take great care of a bunch of people. You've obviously got NHL clients, you've got other players that are playing high level competitive hockey. Can't think of a better spot than to have you located here in Columbus, which is awesome. So where can people find your stuff, what you're doing? Obviously, they can find you up at the Battery here in Columbus. But if they're maybe not in Columbus, where can we find you? And then also
um,
online.
yeah, absolutely. So keegsedges.com is my website. You can go in there and see some of the things I've done and people I've worked with. You can book sharpening sessions right online. Do blade consulting as well. Kind of do that process I just spoke about with the profiling and the hollows and all that kind of stuff. But I do boot maintenance, rivets, holders, whatever you guys need. But yeah, keegsedges.com. Um, got a Facebook page. It's Keeg Sharpening. And then I've got the Instagram as well. So if you're curious about what I offer and what I can do for you guys, just check me out on the media platforms and feel free to reach out to me as well. All my contact information is on my website.
Brilliant. Well, thanks, Keeks. Much appreciated. Keep up the great work, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, man.
concludes this week's episode. Thanks for joining us here at Hockey IQ. If you haven't already, take a quick moment to hit that subscribe button, give us a thumbs up, and drop a review. If you want to be a great teammate, even recommend us to a friend. You can follow us at Hockey's Arsenal on Twitter and Instagram. Check out the website, hockeysarsenal.com, where you can subscribe to the weekly newsletter. You won't regret it. Catch your buttes here next week for a brand new episode.